Hello and welcome to News Central TV. I'm Dashen, Usman. The headlines. Nigerian government says over 1,000 kidnapped victims rescued without ransom. ECOWAS envoys to visit Togo as tensions spike. Press freedom in Burundi questioned as journalist Sandra Muhoza is detained by Secret Service. Details of the stories in a moment. We begin the news in Nigeria, where the National Security Advisor Nuhu Ribadu says the President Bola Tinubu-led federal government has so far rescued over 1,000 kidnapped victims without paying a ransom. Ribadu said this on Monday when he received 22 students and staff of the Federal University of Gusau, Zamfara State, rescued on Sunday. The bandits had on September 22, 2023, invaded the institution and abducted over 30 students and members of staff. 7 of the students were rescued while 2 escaped, leaving 22 others in captivity. However, on Sunday, the 22, comprising 15 students and 7 workers of the university, were rescued in an exercise coordinated by the National Counter-Terrorism Centre. The NSA thanked the security operatives for rescuing the students without losing any one of them or even paying any ransom. The Nigerian military's Operation Safe Haven has dismissed an allegation that its soldiers shot innocent civilians in the recent attacks in Boko's local government area of Plateau State. The Special Task Force in Plateau State, Operation Safe Haven, said that it is committed to remaining neutral, just and fair in its efforts to ensure peace and security of the residents in the state. The media officer of the operation, Major Samson Zakom, said this in a press statement made available to journalists following the allegation of the shooting of civilians by personnel of the operation. Now, according to the statement, the attention of the Special Task Force was drawn to viral petitions written by the coalition of Boko's ethnic youth nationalities, alleging that shooting of civilians by soldiers compounds the vulnerability of Boko's residents. Now, joining me on the news to discuss this is a security expert and CEO, Global Peace and Life Rescue Initiative, Melvin AJ. Hello, Melvin. Good morning. Thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you for having me. How is Lagos today?
All right. So, Melvin, what can you tell us about the recent allegations of the Nigerian military shooting innocent civilians in Plateau State? And also, what are your thoughts to the military's response?
Well, while I sympathize with the people of Bokos, by extension, the ethnic youth nationality group that issued that statement, but I must say that statement is a complete fallacy, a complete falsehood from the pit of hell that should be discountenanced by every serious-minded Nigerian. While I'm not holding brief for the STF, for the military operations, of course they have spoken for themselves, but as a peace worker who is on ground, we also have some facts that it is not in the character of the current commander and his team in the Operation Safe Haven to kill innocent civilians. It is never in their character since they came in. As a matter of fact, I chair also as the desk officer of the Human Rights Board of the Civil Society in Plateau State. So if we have such violation, of course we'd have known. The evidence we have clearly shows that the vigilante group in question was gunned down by another militia group who attacked the community. So I do not think the allegation is correct. The allegation is baseless, and I think it's calculated to tarnish the good reputation of Operation Safe Haven. Why? Also, I still want to emphasize that our sympathy goes to them, our heart goes to the family and the entire community who lost their lives. But I think we should delve in the real issue which is causing this crisis, which is the issue of criminality squarely, instead of always blaming our security agencies. Our security agencies are human beings, they are uncles, they are fathers, we also have relatives like us. In fact, some of our relatives are working elsewhere as this military officer. So the issue of criminalizing them every day, the issue of abusing them every day, the issue of demoralizing them every day won't help us. It will actually tell more on us if we are not careful the way we try to assassinate their character. To the best of my knowledge, the commander in Bokos, the step-up commander in Bokos, the GOC, have been up and doing to ensure that this crisis is finished. They have been neutral so far. We've not had one case of human rights violation against the current commander and his men. If we do, we'll say it. We're not afraid of anybody. But for now, we don't have. So it's actually baseless and senseless and actually calculated to continue to rubbish the image of these good guys who are working tirelessly to keep us safe in this country.
All right, Melvin, you actually did say that, the killings were actually blamed on a militia and not the army. It actually seems kind of similar with what happened in Delta State. And the claim further actually suggests that security forces, that's the military themselves, did not, in fact, effectively stop the conflict on the April 13th. And the military still denied that claim as well. Now, what about casualty numbers? Are there any inquiries regarding the suspected wrongdoing of personnel that were involved in these assaults? Because there should actually be investigations conducted.
The independent inquiry we made to the veracity of allegation of 10 persons killed in Bokos suggests that people that were killed, as painful as it is, are less than 10 in number. I think we have about 3 persons or 4 persons that are confirmed dead. The remaining 6 that was alleged, we don't have such fact. We went to hospitals, we went to the morgue, we went to grave sites where my desk officers went there, and we cannot authoritatively say these 10 people were killed. But what we have on ground, tentatively, is about that 4 persons were killed in both Bokos and Mango local government of this crisis. So I think the casualty figure that is being spread out across the country, across the media, is actually very, very, very wrong. We don't have such number. About 4 persons were killed. As painful as it is, even if one person is killed, is a human being, I think that is not correct. It should be condemned by all. The human life is sacred and should be protected. And coming to the allegation of the military not doing enough to solve the conflict, that is not very correct. The military did their best. The military responded from 3 different fronts in trying to curtail this crisis. Like I said, these assailant know this terrain. The assailant are people that are conversant with all the roads. They are conversant with all the terrains. They are conversant with all the in-road and out-road of this community. So the plan to attack. So there will be more tactical in the attack. Most times when they attack, they just hit and run. They don't stay to face our military men. So for people to just always try to make it look as if the effort of our men in uniform is not paying off, is not correct. They responded actually. The casualty figure would have been more if they didn't respond. They responded actually. They chased the assailant. As a matter of fact, arrests have been made in this regard, and very soon.
Hello, Melvin. Can you hear me? Melvin? All right, we seem to have lost connection with Melvin, but thank you so much for joining me and also, giving an update on this. All right, Melvin, can you hear me?
I can hear you now.
All right, we lost you there for a second. So we would actually love for you to tell us, as a security expert, what are the guidelines that military personnel should or must adhere to in areas of conflict such as Plateau State?
I think the military personnel should remain more professional. They should be more not deterred by the statement coming out from some of these naysayers who are out to demoralize them. They should face their work professionally and ensure that these bad guys are uprooted and taken out of circulation in our society. They should see themselves as people who are called to serve Nigerian, as people who are called to make sacrifice for our safety. They shouldn't be demoralized. They shouldn't be carried. They shouldn't be demoralized by the action of these few guys who don't support them. But I think I'm calling on the larger society to support our military. That's the proper and best thing to do. If the insurgents are after us and we're after the military, I don't know where else we want to go to. So my appeal to them, from the GOC to all these men, that they should not be deterred, they should not they should not relax. They should ensure that they remain professional, neutral, and ensure that these bad guys are taken out of our circulation.
All right. Still talking about the bad guys, do you share similar thoughts that this allegation is actually being portrayed in a religious light to evoke emotions and potentially spark conflict, in other areas of Plateau State? And this is actually as stated by the media officer of the operation.
I agree absolutely. The issue in Plateau State, yes, sometimes it do have some kind of religious coloration, but the issue in Plateau State mostly is the issue of criminality, especially the recent one in Mangu and Bokos is actually criminally based. But if by the time we deal with the criminal aspect of this conflict, we will not have issue. Like the Mangu, the average Magavul man lives together with his Muslim brother. You see one family where you have 5 Muslims, 5 Christians. They live together over the years. So I don't think it's the issue of religion per se. It's the issue of criminality. By the time we begin to speak to our children who are criminals, by the time we begin to address this issue of criminality, we'll have a better Plateau State. So I think people should deviate from that issue of religion and face the real issue, which is criminality. We should come together, sit down together, and discuss those issues that are affecting our society today, which is purely criminality. That is my take. And I think every lover of peace, every lover of truth without sentiment will tell you this for free, that what we have at hand is the issue of criminality, where cattle are rustled at will, where farms are destroyed at will. By the time we have this come together and address this issue squarely, we will not have issue on the plateau. This is my take, and I think we must do that to get it right.
All right, well, thank you so much, Melvin AJ, for joining me on the news and also updating me on this issue.
Thank you for having me.
All right, well, moving away from that, education stakeholders in Nigeria have blamed ungoverned spaces, lack of access to telecommunication network, and poor infrastructure for the failure to achieve any meaningful progress in Nigeria's Safe School Initiative program. Now, this was as they met in the nation's capital, Abuja, to review the initiative expected to guarantee a safer learning environment of children in the country. Marvelous Obomanu reports.
10 years after the Chibok school abduction, the memories of pain and despair remain fresh. Many families say they are yet to recover from the ordeal, while the Chibok community has been left deserted. To end these attacks, the federal government launched the Safe School Initiative. However, 10 years down the line, stakeholders say the program has not recorded much success.
Another challenge is that schools are either at the entrance or at the high end of the community. So basically, they are not in the middle of the community.
None of the schools, to my knowledge, that have been attacked so far, none of them were registered but that does not mean that because they are not registered, they should not be protected. I'm only saying that there is need for us to register them so that we can have timely information.
They say, out of the 21 minimum standards set for its successful implementation, only a few schools are even able to achieve a 70% benchmark.
On average, states are implementing about 9 of the 21 minimum standards. So less than half of the minimum standards are actually being implemented. They're doing very well on the training of school-based management committees, on violence in schools, but the areas where they're really struggling are around safe school infrastructure, so making sure there's a lockable fence, there's a gate.
Schools are in open spaces, and there is a huge need to surround the schools and to invest in this. And this is the type of investments that are easy to address at the state level.
The plan was actually launched in 2022, and the federal government made provision of 15 billion, although released the 15 billion in 2023 for effective implementation. And we started implementation late last year.
We surveyed 81,000 plus schools, or 70% of them had no fences. Another 70% or even more had nobody, a security guard that is guarding the school.
These abductions, according to some Nigerians, have raised concerns on the future of education in the country. They say government at all levels must give the program the needed push to herald a new dawn in Nigeria's education sector. In Abuja for News Central, Marvelous Obomanu.
Away from that, the coroner's inquest held at the Ogba Magistrate Court to investigate the death of Sylvester Jr. Oromoni, a 12-year-old student of Darwin College, Lekki, has concluded that his death was due to negligence on the part of his parents and doctor. Mikhail Kadiri, the coroner magistrate, declared that Oromoni's enlarged liver was not adequately treated, which resulted in his death. Oromoni died on November 30th, 2021. His death was initially attributed to bullying and an alleged toxic substance he was forced to take in school. He was said to have mentioned that he was beaten up by 5 senior students of Darwin College before he died. The National Identity Management Commission has announced that it is targeting the enrollment of 200 million Nigerians in the National Identification Number System by 2025. The head of corporate communications at the commission, Kayode Adegoke, disclosed during a conversation on X Space, formerly Twitter, that so far over 105 million NIN have been issued to Nigerians and legal residents. However, to reach its target of 200 million enrollments by 2025, an additional 95 million Nigerians need to register. The NIMC spokesperson said the commission remains steadfast in its commitment to achieving universal enrollment in the NIN system by 2025. The NIN, a unique identifier assigned to each citizen, has gained prominence in recent years as the cornerstone of various government initiatives aimed at enhancing security, governance, and service delivery. Welcome back and thank you for staying with us. The former governor of Kaduna State, Nasir El-Rufai, has said that Nigerian government is spending about 8 trillion naira on petrol subsidies. He made the revelation during a workshop on enhancing skills of government officials which took place in Maiduguri on Monday. News Central's Umar Kirawa completes the report.
Skills of government officials being enhanced in policy implementation and productive human resources management in Borno State. Leadership and public policy, navigating challenges and lessons is the topic which participants listening to garner more experience. Local solutions to local problems is what the lead paper presenter is advocating for.
People are not happy with the federal government. People want their destiny in their hands. People want more power devolved to the states and to the local governments so that they can solve their local problems. People want state police. I think it was Borno State that started civilian JTF, and that was the first time that a handle on solving the security problems began to emerge. Only a local person knows who is the local criminal.
He spoke on one of the burning issues in Nigeria, removal of subsidy from petrol.
It is important to always have policies and to debate them, and if they are wrong, you reverse. For instance, as you announced withdrawal of fuel subsidy on 29th of May. Well, believe it or not, fuel subsidy is back. So we are spending more on subsidy now, about 8 trillion, than before 29th of May, because we realize that you cannot withdraw fuel subsidy if your exchange rate is not stable. You'll just have hyperinflation, so they have to reverse. So no policy is cast in stone. It's not putting the program. If you start implementing and there are problems, modify it, drop it, reverse it.
Leadership deficit, according to Malam El-Rufai, is what needs to be improved upon to address some of the major headache the country is experiencing. Several speakers during the workshop shared their thoughts on the concept of leadership.
We are going to get a bumper harness from wealth of experience and ultimately get value for our efforts.
Most of these policies are not understood by the public. But you being part of it will explain to your colleagues in the settlements.
The visit by Malam El-Rufai to Borno State will be discussed more in political cycles in coming days, as some loud whispers suggest this may be the beginning of the race for the next elections in 3 years' time. In Maiduguri for News Central, Umar Kirawa.
Barely 1 month after the demolition of a section of Jakonde Estate in Lagos, residents are still in search of closure. Now, while the Lagos state government is engaging the leaders of the Residents Association on addressing their concerns, the big question is how the huge housing deficit in the state and other major cities in the country can be reduced at the same time with urbanization and development. Now, providing answers to this, News Central this morning is hosting a town hall meeting with the affected evictees of the estate and relevant stakeholders. Now let's join my colleague Bernard Akede, who is at the venue to bring us up to speed with preparations. Hello, Bernard. Good morning. Thank you so much for joining me.
Good morning. Good morning, Dashen. Thank you for having me on this morning.
Yes. All right. So, what can you tell us about the town hall meeting? What should we expect?
All right, so this town hall meeting was initiated by New Central Television, like you clearly mentioned, and this is because we want to hear the direct plight of the people whose buildings, whose structures were demolished around the Jakonde axis of Lekki in Lagos. This demolition took place about a month ago, and our correspondent Niyo Money was on the ground here to interview some of the affected victims. We know that there were landlords here who buildings, but also tenants who were affected, whose properties, whose belongings were thrown out. There were people who had shops, who had kiosks that were legally, they got them with legal permits, and they were equally affected. So, as you can see around, and chairs that we have set, down for our expected guests, who of course are the affected persons. They have been in talks with members of the government, but we want to hear directly from them, and we want them to speak directly to everybody out there who can hear and who can help. We're also expecting to have, legal representatives. We're expecting to have experts in the building construction. We're expecting somebody from the side of the government as well to speak back and to also listen to us. We do hope that elements of the weather will not deter their efforts in coming. But basically, this is what we want to do, to see how we, as News Central Television, can mediate between the affected people and the government, and how we possibly can, if we can, force the hand of the government to do something for these people who have lost their homes and for others who also have lost their sources of livelihood.
All right, Bernard, now talking about the government, what explanations or justifications in the first place was actually given by the authorities for the demolition of some of these houses?
The government official who was able to spoke to the camera talked about the dilapidated state of the estate, so to speak, some of the structures in that estate. Now, there are some who are also of the school of thought, believing that the coastal road from Lagos to Calabar that has been in the news for the past couple of weeks may also be one of the reasons why this area, was demolished. Although, if you look at the map, you'll see that this coastal road is a couple of kilometers away from the estate. But then again, it could also be a reason. So this is one of the reasons that have been given. And there also was the reason, that this area had, for some time, had certain persons of questionable character. Remember back then, during the NSAS crisis, when certain places were robbed, were raided, and were burnt down and destroyed, there were claims that there were some elements who came from this particular area or areas who perpetrated some of these crimes. So this could also be part of the reason why this place is affected. But we're hoping that we will get closer as to why this place was actually demolished, if we do eventually get someone to speak from the government. If we do not get anyone today to speak from the government, we will continue to see why and how we can actually, or rather, why the place was demolished, and then how we can get, reasons from government officials and what can be done, basically, again, for these people who have been affected.
All right, Bernard, hopefully we will be getting a positive outcome from this town hall meeting, but we will definitely be reconnecting with you later in our subsequent bulletin so that you can give us an update on the meeting. Thank you so much, Bernard.
Thank you for having me.
Now, away from that, over the weekend, organized labor in Nigeria submitted a fresh proposal to the federal government of Nigeria demanding 615,000 naira as the new minimum wage for workers in the country. Now, according to sources, the 615,000 naira monthly was reached after consultations by the two major labor centers, that's the NLC and the TUC. Labor demand comes ahead of the recommendations of a 37-member panel set up by the federal government on January 30th to come up with a new national minimum wage. Earlier, labor law expert Ireoluwa Oguntuashe joined us on the news and gave us an expert's view on this.
I think the federal government, headed by the President of the Federal Republic of Nigeria, also have the powers under the Minimum Wage Act to also sit down with them and come to a resolution on, what best the federal government can pay in this circumstance. But most important thing that we even need to consider is that, is this the solution? Because if we look at Section 4 of the Minimum Wage Act, it excludes some categories of people from enjoying this minimum wage. For example, Section 4 actually excludes employers that has 25 employees or lesser, and from the minimum wage. So, and employers that are paid commission or piecemeal basis from the minimum wage. So, if we look at that, I think I would say that to the extent in which the Minimum Wage Act doesn't cover the fields in relation to all categories of employees, I don't think all employees will still benefit from the Minimum Wage Act.
You're still watching News Central now. Coming up, ECOWAS envoys to visit Togo as tensions spike. We'll bring you details after the break. Thank you for staying with us. Now, West Africa's regional bloc, ECOWAS, says a delegation is expected in Togo as tensions soar over a constitutional reform the opposition says will extend the tenure of President Faure Gnassingbe, who has been in office since 2005. The delegation, which has been invited by the government, said its mission will interact with main stakeholders on the latest developments in Togo before legislative and regional elections on April 29th. Tensions have soared in Togo since last month when lawmakers backed a constitutional reform that would move the country to a parliamentary system where lawmakers would elect the president for a 6-year term. Togolese authorities banned planned protests against the reform by the opposition and civil society groups in recent days, further ratcheting up tensions. UK lawmakers have rejected all changes to the Rwanda bill made in the House of Lords in an ongoing parliamentary standoff, and the bill will now return to the upper chamber for further scrutiny on Tuesday. The proposed law has been undergoing legislative ping-pong, with Parliament's elected House of Commons and the unelected House of Lords sending the bill back to each other for amendments. The plan is to send some asylum seekers to Rwanda, which has faced setbacks since it was first announced in April 2022 by Boris Johnson's government. The bill, which declares Rwanda safe, is likely to pass this week, with the government's majority meaning any further amendments made by peers should be overturned.
And voted down each of the Lords' amendments. I invite all right honourable and honourable members to stand with the government in upholding the will of the House of Commons and to support the government motions.
Hundreds of millions of pounds of taxpayers' money have been sent to the Rwandan government. Civil servants, courts, parliamentarians and journalists have spent countless hours, days and weeks discussing and writing about it. And not one, not two, but 3 Home Secretaries have been flown down to Kigali. But apart from that, I have to say there's not a great deal to report, Madam Deputy Speaker.
The family of a Burundian journalist, Sandra Muhoza, says she has been detained by the National Intelligence Service, raising new concerns for press freedom in the East African country. 42-year-old Muhoza, a journalist for online outlet Lenova Burundi, was arrested on Sunday and is being held in the economic capital, Bujumbura. According to the director of Lenova, Pascal Ndayishenga, the reason for her arrest is still unknown. The government of President Evariste Ndayishimiye, who took office in June 2020, has been widely criticized for failing to improve Burundi's human rights record. It is not the first time journalists in Burundi have been targeted. In 2023, journalist Florine Irangbayi was sentenced to 10 years in prison for undermining the integrity of the national territory, although the grounds of the charge are unknown. Still ahead, Biden renews Kyiv military aid plea We'll bring you details after the break. Now, in other news from around the world, U.S. President Joe Biden made a fresh plea to Congress to pass aid for Ukraine during a visit by Czech Prime Minister Petr Fiala on Monday, as a fight brews about whether it should be linked to funds for Israel. Biden hailed the Czech leader as a great ally for his strong support for Ukraine since Russia's 2022 invasion, including securing nearly 1 million rounds of ammunition for Kyiv as U.S. funding dries up. After shaking hands with Joe Biden in the Oval Office, Czech Prime Minister Petr Fiala thanked the U.S. president for his leadership in mustering Western support of Kyiv.
Mr. President, I appreciate your leadership in support of Ukraine. We are also doing our best to help Ukraine and to stop Putin's aggression. In 1968, I was a little boy. In 1968, I saw Russian tanks in the streets of my town, and I don't want to see this again. So we must continue to support Ukraine as long as possible. That is the reason why we started Czech Ammunition Initiative. It will provide Ukraine with hundreds of thousands of artillery shells very soon. It will happen in next few weeks and months.
Donald Trump says he has a real problem with the judge handling his New York criminal case and that he should be on the campaign trail instead of in court. Trump lamented to reporters outside the Manhattan courtroom after jury selection ended for the day that he would be missing his son's graduation and campaign opportunities because of the trial. He has repeatedly criticized the judge presiding over the trial, and Merchant rejected a request by the former president's attorneys on Monday that he recuse himself from the case. Trump, the first ex-president to face criminal charges, is accused of falsifying business records for allegedly paying hush money to a porn star just days ahead of the 2016 presidential election to cover up a 2006 sexual encounter.
We got a real problem with this judge. We have a real problem with a lot of things having to do with this trial, including the DA, because you go right outside and people are being mugged and killed all day long, and he's sitting here all day with about 10 or 12 prosecutors over nothing. So I just want to thank you very much, but that I can't go to my son's graduation, or that I can't go to the United States Supreme Court, that I'm not in Georgia or Florida or North Carolina campaigning like I should be. It's perfect for the radical left Democrats. That's exactly what they want. This is about election interference. That's all it's about. Thank you very much.
Thousands took to the streets in the Georgian capital of Tbilisi to protest a controversial foreign influence. That's the bill that critics say mirrors repressive Russian legislation used to silence dissent. A former Soviet republic, Georgia, has sought for years to deepen relations with the West, but the current ruling party is accused of trying to steer the mountainous Caucasus, that's the Caucasus nation, towards closer ties with Russia.
როცა სტრატეგიული პარტნიორები გვეუბნებიან, რომ მიუღებელია, რაღაც არ არის რიგზე, ჯერა რომ აი უაზრო ყოყოჩინობის ადგილი არ არის და
დღეს რაც მოხდა პარლამენტის კომიტეტზე, ის არის გამოძახილი ქართველი ერის და გამორიცხულია, რომ რუსული კანონი გავიდეს. უბრალოდ ეს ვერ მოხდება.
გარემოს, არა რუსულ კანონს. ეს არის ჩვენი ფუნდამენტური არჩევანი, რაც ჩვენმა ქვეყანამ გააკეთა ძალიან დიდი ხნის წინ, რომ ჩვენ ვართ ევროპა, ვირჩევთ ევროპას და რაც არ უნდა მოხდეს, ვინც არ უნდა იყოს ჩვენს ხელისუფლებაში, არ დავუშვებთ, რომ დაგვაბრუნოთ.
Australian police on Tuesday said a brutal knife attack during a live-streamed church service was a religious-motivated terrorist act as they urged calm for the angered local community. 2 people were stabbed when a 16-year-old suspect rushed the dais at an Assyrian Christian church in Western Sydney late Monday, slashing wildly at the bishop who was giving a sermon. The bishop was stabbed in the head and chest and taken to hospital. The attacker was immediately subdued by outraged congregants and later taken into police custody. Meanwhile, Australian Prime Minister Anthony Albanese, following the attack, called for the country to unite.
This is a disturbing incident. There is no place for violence in our community. There is no place for violent extremism. We are a peace-loving nation. This is a time to unite, not divide as a community and as a country. Last night, the New South Wales Police overnight declared this a terror incident and have stood up Strike Force Patrina. As a result of that declaration, a joint counter-terrorism task force has been established, which includes the AFP and ASIO.
At the same time, our job is also to look at individuals connected with the attacker to assure ourselves that there is no one else in the community with similar intent. At this stage, we have no indications of that, but it is prudent that we do this to determine there is no threats or immediate threats to security.
Now let's join our business desk for today's news.
Nigeria has renewed efforts to capture a chunk of the huge fallouts from the $460 billion expected savings from the mitigation of methane emissions. According to reports, a whopping $1 billion is set aside to achieve the 45%, which is expected to create such huge size of savings. To achieve this, Nigeria is said to have been carved out into zones for mitigation efforts. The West African giant is in the top 10 highest methane emission countries in the world, which are said to contribute 50% of the total global size. We now tell you that Kenya's Energy and Petroleum Regulatory Authority has slashed electricity cost per unit by 3.3 shillings in the latest tariff update for this month. The new rates will see the lowest spenders, customers consuming less than 30 units per month, that is domestic customer 1, pay 20.96 shillings for a unit. It is a 13.7% reduction compared to the previous month when KPLC allocated a single unit to this segment at 24.3 shillings. Customer segments are consuming between 31 to 100 units per month, that is domestic customer 2, will purchase a unit of 26.23 shillings compared to the previous month of 29.55 shillings. The last segment of consumers using more than 100 units of power a month, that is domestic customer 3, will part away with 31.06 shillings for a unit as compared to the previous month where they were paying 34.39 shillings. Finally, the World Bank has said that for the first time this century, half of the world's 75 poorest nations are witnessing a widening income gap compared to the wealthiest economies, making a significant historical reversal in development trends. According to the report, per capita income growth in these countries has lagged the richest nations over the past 5 years. 75 countries eligible for grants and zero-interest loans from the World Bank's International Development Association risk a loss of a decade of development without ambitious policy shifts and significant international aid. Growth in many IDA countries had already begun to taper off before the COVID-19 pandemic, but it would be just 3.4% in 2020 to 2024, the weakest half-decade of growth since the early 1990s.
And that's all at this hour. But before we go, let's take another look at some of our major stories. We told you that Nigerian government says over 1,000 kidnapped victims rescued without ransom. We also told you that ECOWAS envoys to visit Togo as tensions spike. Finally, you heard that press freedom in Burundi questioned as journalist Sandra Muhoza is detained by Secret Service. Send your eyewitness report to the WhatsApp number on the screen. Do follow us on social media. We are at News Central TV. You can watch News Central live on DSTV channel 422, Star Times Channel 274, Avo TV, and YouTube. Many thanks for watching. I'm Dashen. Usman.